A heavy brass royal seal struck the crimson parchment, its sharp impact echoing through the suffocating stillness of King Charles's private study at Windsor Castle. With that single stroke of wax, Meghan Markle's access to the British monarchy was severed forever. Any remaining route back to royal life ground to a sudden halt after the Duchess of Sussex attempted to exploit Catherine's quiet recovery period. By demanding temporary custody over the Crown's most prestigious patronages and requesting the restricted designation Princess of Wales representative, her team triggered an immediate constitutional crisis. In the cold calculus of the palace, royal patronages function as sacred legal bridges between the sovereign and the nation's most vital charities, serving as the ultimate badge of public trust. Claiming those duties without approval was not an offer of help. It was an unpardonable overreach into the future Queen's authority. A years-long battle of attrition concluded with an absolute constitutional decree. Meghan's name was systematically struck from every upcoming national event, dissolving any leverage her California team held over the palace. Charles adjusted his glasses, his gaze locking onto the leaked press drafts with icy detachment. Royalty, his silence signaled, could never be negotiated through media pressure. Yet, this uncompromising decree sent immediate shockwaves across the globe, leaving the public fiercely divided. Was this absolute ban a necessary shield to safeguard a vulnerable princess, or an unnecessarily cruel banishment of the Sussexes? If you believe King Charles made the right call to protect Catherine, type 1 in the comments below. But if you feel this permanent ban goes too far, leave a 2. The ancient oak door of the green drawing room slammed shut, its heavy latch dropping with a dull thud that signaled the total exclusion of the outside world. Within seconds, royal protection officers stationed along the grand corridor activated high-power signal jammers, instantly cutting off all mobile frequencies and wireless transmissions around this secluded wing of Windsor Castle. Inside, the atmosphere turned brutally tense. Sunlight filtered weakly through the tall arched windows, casting long, somber shadows across a polished mahogany table littered with red leather dispatch boxes and confidential legal dossiers. Senior legal advisors stood alongside Princess Anne, their postures rigid and unyielding as they surrounded the sovereign. A chilling freeze settled over the room the moment King Charles spoke. Shattering any lingering hope for a diplomatic compromise, the sovereign delivered a crushing blow to the Sussex camp by ordering the immediate and permanent shutdown of all informal communication channels. A suffocating silence weighed on every official present. The 75-year-old monarch had finally reached the absolute limit of his endurance following this latest calculated media maneuver from California. Without a word, Princess Anne stepped forward to seize the remaining diplomatic folders. Her sharp eyes scanned the pages before she gave a quiet nod to the palace solicitors, signaling the execution of a protocol designed to seal and archive every public duty record linked to the office of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. In royal governance, an executive decree to revoke administrative access operates as an absolute constitutional firewall. It strips away an individual's legal standing to represent the Crown, neutralizing their capacity to act on behalf of the sovereign in any official capacity. Every glance exchanged around the table reinforced a cold reality. Institutional survival had completely overwritten personal affection, leaving no room for sentimental concessions within the walls of Windsor Castle. A senior private secretary reached for a silver fountain pen, his knuckles white as he prepared the formal order for the king's signature. Nobody dared to break the stillness. The quiet hum of the signal jammers served as a constant reminder that privacy was now being enforced by security protocols rather than unspoken family trust. Outside the windows, the overcast Berkshire sky darkened, matching the stern mood governing the inner sanctum of the monarchy. The Prince of Wales stood near the fireplace, his jaw set, his gaze fixed on the confidential briefings detailing the unauthorized media strategy prepared in California. Princess Anne moved with practiced efficiency, placing each retrieved file into a heavy steel briefcase before securing it with a numeric combination known only to senior members of the royal household. Her movements were swift, methodical, and devoid of hesitation. When the monarch leaned back in his leather chair, the faint rustle of parchment paper sounded exceptionally loud in the silent room. His expression remained unreadable, yet the firm set of his mouth conveyed an unequivocal message to his closest advisers. The process of severing institutional ties was now fully underway, moving forward with the quiet precision of an ancient apparatus protecting its core. Personal grievances were systematically set aside, replaced entirely by the rigid mechanics of constitutional duty. Officials who had spent decades serving the crown recognized the gravity of this moment. They understood that once these formal orders were logged into the official register, the decision became part of the permanent record, immune to private revision or casual reconsideration. The king raised a hand, his fingers resting briefly against his temple as he listened to the chief legal counsel outline the immediate consequences of the order. Every clause was reviewed with meticulous care, ensuring that no loophole remained for future legal challenges or public misinterpretations. Across the table, Princess Anne placed her palms flat on the wood, her voice low and decisive, as she confirmed that all security clearances associated with the Sussex office were being revoked effective immediately. The measures were sweeping, designed to prevent any further unauthorized leaks or attempts to bypass formal palace communications. The atmosphere inside the room grew even heavier as the reality of the decision sank in among the assembled aides. For years, the palace had maintained a delicate balance between family diplomacy and statecraft, hoping that quiet patience might eventually restore stability. That era had now come to a definitive end. Outside the heavy draperies, the wind rustled through the courtyard, but inside, not a single person shifted their weight. The silence was absolute, broken only by the steady scratching of the pen as the final documents received the royal assent. A senior advisor stepped forward to collect the signed pages, placing them neatly into a velvet-lined binder. The document carried the full weight of the crown, a binding instruction that no official, courtier, or representative could question or delay. William watched in total silence as the binder was closed and sealed with cold wax. His expression remained hardened, reflecting the immense burden of protecting his wife's standing and the integrity of the institution he would one day inherit. Charles looked around the room, his eyes lingering for a moment on the empty chairs where advisors usually sat during routine briefings. Today, there were no routine discussions, no debates over schedules, and no room for second-guessing. The Princess Royal secured the steel briefcase, its heavy lock clicking into place with a sharp sound that seemed to punctuate the end of the meeting. She picked up the handle, prepared to deliver the files directly to the palace archives, where they would remain locked away from public view. As the king stood up from his chair, every official in the room bowed their head in unison. The audience was concluded, the orders were issued, and the path forward was set without the slightest possibility of reversal. The heavy oak door was finally unlocked from the outside, allowing the advisors to depart one by one into the long, shadowed hallways of Windsor Castle. Behind them, the green drawing room returned to stillness, holding the quiet memory of a decision that permanently altered the alignment of the royal family. Across the Atlantic in California, a growing sense of isolation had settled over the Sussex estate. Months of fading headlines and diminishing media influence had fueled a desperate desire to reclaim a standing within the global narrative. Driven by the deep-seated fear of being permanently erased from the machinery of royal influence, Meghan engineered a bold strategy for re-emergence, cleverly cloaked under the guise of an emergency intervention. The situation erupted into a full-scale internal crisis when an official letter arrived from California outlining an extraordinary demand. Meghan requested temporary custody of the silver Patronage Badge, alongside the authority to act as the primary representative for Catherine's premier charitable foundations, while the princess remained focused on her medical recovery. In the structure of the British monarchy, royal patronages serve as the ultimate legal foundation and moral currency, granting the bearer the supreme authority to direct national public service initiatives and shape the philanthropic legacy of the crown. The true catalyst of the conflict emerged when Princess Anne uncovered how these restricted internal terms had reached Montecito in the first place. A meticulous security audit revealed that the precise authorization language had been leaked through confidential notes compiled by a former palace communications secretary who had recently departed royal service. Simultaneously, Meghan's team in California quietly dispatched a coordinated media dossier to major American television networks. The carefully crafted outline framed her proposal not as a demand for power, but as a selfless act of family solidarity and institution-saving goodwill. When the briefing reached the Prince of Wales, William's composure fractured completely. He viewed this attempt to seize his wife's patronages not as a gesture of support, but as a ruthless and transparent exploitation of Catherine's most vulnerable moment. The realization that internal documents had been funneled out of the palace household added a dangerous layer of betrayal to an already volatile situation. Princess Anne paced near the window of the private briefing room, holding the security logs that confirmed the match between the former secretary's archived files and the exact phrasing used in Meghan's demand. For William, the breach went far beyond protocol. It was a direct assault on the foundation of trust that protected his family during a delicate period of privacy. The idea that Catherine's years of quiet dedication and carefully built public trust could be commandeered through an orchestrated press campaign ignited a fierce determination to shut down the initiative permanently. In California, the public relations strategy had been designed to create an inescapable trap for Buckingham Palace. By presenting the offer to major news anchors before a formal response could be issued from London, the Sussex team calculated that the king would be forced to accept the arrangement rather than face global criticism for refusing an offer of family unity. However, that strategy miscalculated the internal resilience of the royal household. Instead of bending under the pressure of potential headlines, the inner circle at Windsor closed ranks with absolute resolve. Princess Anne pointed out that the silver patronage badge was not merely a decorative insignia, but a physical and legal key to the governance of the nation's most prestigious philanthropic trusts. Allowing an individual outside the active working monarchy to hold that badge, even temporarily, would set a catastrophic precedent, effectively decoupling royal authority from daily public service and accountability. As the details of the leaked media briefing were laid bare, the atmospheric pressure inside the palace reached a breaking point. The narrative prepared for American television networks described a modern, forward-thinking royal stepping in to bridge the gap left by an absent princess. To William, those words were a calculated insult, attempting to rewrite Catherine's necessary medical leave as an abandoned post waiting to be claimed. The Prince of Wales made it unequivocally clear to the king that no compromise could be entertained. Allowing an outside party to leverage Catherine's patronages while she guarded her health would undermine the integrity of her office forever. Charles listened intently as his sister laid out the timeline of the leak, showing how the former communications secretary had retained sensitive files long after leaving her post at the palace. The betrayal was twofold: an internal breach of confidentiality and an external attempt to coerce the sovereign through coordinated media pressure. The anger in the room was no longer just about family dynamics, it had evolved into a defense of constitutional boundaries. Every official present recognized that if a member of the royal family could use leaked internal terminology to demand public duties through the media, the entire structure of the working monarchy would collapse into public bargaining. William stood over the mahogany table, his fists clenched as he examined the draft press release obtained from the U.S. networks. The language was polished, seductive, and dangerous, designed to appeal to an international audience that understood little of royal protocol but responded eagerly to themes of modern family reconciliation. Yet beneath the sleek phrasing lay a cold ambition that the palace could not ignore. The demand for the silver patronage badge was an attempt to acquire the status of a working royal without fulfilling the daily discipline, restraint, and lifetime commitment that the role required. With the source of the leak identified and the full scope of the media maneuver exposed, the palace prepared its response. There would be no public debate, no diplomatic signaling through third parties, and no room for further negotiation. The crisis had reached its turning point, setting the stage for an unprecedented confrontation behind closed doors. A specially encrypted long-distance line was established directly between Windsor Castle and the estate in California, operating under the strict supervision of senior royal solicitors. King Charles sat before the screen, his expression unyielding as he calmly dismissed every defensive argument regarding a shared burden of public duty coming from Meghan. The sovereign struck the heavy wooden table with the side of his hand when the California side implied that the international public was slowly forgetting the presence of the monarchy without modern faces representing the institution. In constitutional practice, an official grant of public authorization is a formal decree approved by the sovereign that allows an individual to temporarily exercise royal authority without granting them ownership of any accompanying title or rank. William stepped directly into the camera frame, flatly declaring that gathering confidential intelligence from a former staff member to exert pressure on the family constituted a severe moral violation. The screen cut to black instantly as King Charles issued a fierce final declaration, stating that Catherine's dignity was something that could never be bargained over or leveraged. The encrypted feed, routed through private palace servers to ensure no recording devices could intercept the transmission, had begun with strict legal parameters. On the London end, the king was flanked only by the Prince of Wales and two senior palace attorneys who remained motionless in the shadows behind the oak desk. Across the ocean, Meghan sat in her private office, attempting to frame her demand as a strategic modernization of the Crown's global outreach. When Meghan argued that taking over Catherine's patronages would protect the monarchy from looking stagnant during a prolonged period of royal absence, the atmosphere in the room turned arctic. Charles leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, authoritative register that cut off her sentence mid-phrase. He made it clear that public service was built on quiet discipline, not opportunistic PR campaigns disguised as emergency assistance. The tension peaked when the conversation turned to the silver patronage badge and the leaked internal documents. Meghan attempted to downplay the involvement of the former communications secretary, suggesting that former employees were simply trying to help facilitate a smooth transition for the crown. That was the exact moment William moved into view. His sudden presence on screen shifted the dynamic from a parental discussion to an institutional reckoning. The Prince of Wales did not raise his voice, but his words carried absolute finality. He confronted Meghan directly with the findings of the security report, pointing out that using archived palace files to construct a public pressure strategy shattered whatever remaining professional boundary existed between the two households. Meghan attempted to pivot, bringing up her international reach, charity network, and the willingness of major American broadcast networks to highlight a unified royal family. She argued that the palace was rejecting an offer that could revitalize the institution's standing among younger global audiences. Charles listened without interrupting until the word vacancy was used to describe Catherine's quiet period of medical recovery. The king's hand came down on the desk, the sharp impact ringing through the secure line and silencing the speaker in California. A woman's health, the king stated, is not an abandoned estate waiting to be claimed by whoever creates enough public noise. Catherine is a person, not an open seat in a corporate boardroom. Before any further arguments could be assembled from Montecito, Charles reached forward and terminated the connection himself. The encrypted monitors went completely dark, leaving the private study in absolute silence as the weight of an irreversible decision settled over Windsor Castle. Within a matter of hours, a systematic process to erase influence was initiated across the entire digital and physical archive system of Buckingham Palace. Every registration file for public representation, charitable foundation access credential, and security privilege linked to Meghan was permanently struck from the official public duty directory. The Royal Household Communications Department erected an absolute information firewall, resolutely withholding the details of Catherine's recovery timeline to prevent further media speculation and spin. Princess Anne issued an immediate order to isolate all internal communication channels, officially revoking the access passes and data privileges of the former communications secretary who had leaked the sensitive files. A quiet yet thorough purge unfolded across the civil service apparatus of the royal household, reasserting the unyielding discipline of the monarchy. The legitimate door for Meghan's return to royal duties was officially locked from the inside. The mechanical execution of the order moved with astonishing speed. Inside the quiet corridors of the Lord Chamberlain's office, senior archivists and IT administrators worked methodically to scrub Meghan's name from every contingency roster. Draft schedules for upcoming state dinners, international tours, and ceremonial anniversaries were updated to ensure that no provisional role, secondary seating, or background representation remained reserved for the Duchess of Sussex. Simultaneously, the palace press office shifted to a wartime footing. Rather than issuing reactive statements to counter rumors emanating from California broadcast networks, the communications team enforced an absolute blackout regarding Catherine's personal life. The strategy was clear: protect the Princess of Wales by treating her health as an untouchable private matter rather than a topic for public negotiation. By refusing to brief reporters on her recovery milestones, the palace deprived external commentators of the raw material needed to manufacture narratives about a leadership void. Princess Anne personally oversaw the internal security response. Working alongside the Director of Security for the royal household, she ensured that the former communications secretary who had supplied confidential notes to Montecito was stripped of all residual clearance. Access logs were audited, security protocols were updated across all royal residences, and staff members who had maintained informal contact with the former employee were quietly interviewed. The message sent to the household staff was unmistakable. Loyalty to the institution was non-negotiable, and any breach of confidentiality would result in immediate dismissal and potential legal action. Behind closed doors, this administrative cleanup operated as a quiet purge. It was not broadcast through dramatic public announcements, but through the precise, bureaucratic removal of administrative privileges. Laptops were reconfigured, encrypted communication networks were reset, and official mailing lists were purged of non-working members. This silent enforcement of discipline demonstrated the cold, enduring strength of the monarchy. When faced with an external challenge that threatened to divide the household, the institution protected itself not through public debate, but through the absolute enforcement of its own rules. By the time the sun set over London, the administrative infrastructure supporting the working monarchy had been completely sealed. Every legal pathway, security clearance, and official pretext that Meghan could have used to claim a public role beside senior royals had been dismantled. The mechanism of statecraft had functioned exactly as intended, ensuring that any future attempt to claim royal authority from across the ocean would be met with an unyielding, impenetrable wall of institutional silence. As the first light of dawn broke over the frost-dusted grounds of Windsor Castle, pale golden beams filtered through the tall leaded windows of the king's private reading room. Catherine stepped quietly into the study, seeking an unscripted, private conversation with the monarch without the presence of aides, private secretaries, or legal advisors. With quiet grace and profound empathy, the Princess of Wales gently asked the sovereign to draw a clear line between the aggressive ambition of the California media campaign and his enduring paternal affection for Harry. Catherine reasoned with Charles that shutting the door on institutional involvement did not mean a father had to permanently abandon his younger son. Deeply moved by her counsel, King Charles accepted her wisdom, deciding to maintain the absolute ban on public duties for Meghan while establishing a secure, private phone line intended solely for direct father and son communication. The sovereign reached for Meghan's proposal demanding the silver Patronage Badge, slowly tore the document in two, and placed the fragments into a locked steel box reserved for archived royal crises. The private meeting concluded with a quiet, emotional stillness, where the cold mechanics of constitutional law yielded to a father's enduring love. The room smelled faintly of old leather, polished mahogany, and the lingering embers of the fireplace. Charles sat near the hearth, looking exhausted after a sleepless night spent reviewing legal briefings and executive orders. The heavy burden of his dual role as head of state and head of a divided family weighed visibly upon his shoulders. Catherine approached softly, placing a warm tea tray on the side table before taking a seat opposite the sovereign. There was no anger in her voice, only a deep, reflective calm that instantly softened the heavy atmosphere in the room. She acknowledged the anger felt across the households, agreeing that the attempt to commandeer her patronages and exploit her health recovery was an unacceptable line crossed. Yet, she looked at the king, not as a monarch enforcing discipline, but as a father carrying a profound personal heartbreak. She reminded Charles that Harry had grown up inside a rigid system that often blurred the lines between family duty and public perception, making him vulnerable to external influences during moments of personal frustration. Catherine spoke of the future, urging the king not to allow the bitterness of an institutional battle to extinguish every remaining bridge to his second-born son. Punishing Harry for a strategy engineered around him, she argued, would only seal his isolation and darken the legacy of Charles's reign with permanent family estrangement. The firmest boundaries could still coexist with quiet mercy. The king listened in silence, his hand rest on the armrest of his chair as he pondered her words. The wisdom of the future queen was clear. Institutional authority had to remain absolute and protected, but a father's heart did not need to become a fortress of ice. He agreed to revise the final administrative decree, ensuring that while every official channel, patronage request, and royal duty path remained permanently barred for Meghan, a private, encrypted communication line would remain open exclusively for Harry to reach his father outside the purview of palace politics or media strategy. Charles then picked up the formal written demand from Montecito that had sparked the entire crisis. He looked at the printed text, claiming authority over the silver Patronage Badge one last time. With deliberate slowness, he tore the pages down the middle, the sound of tearing paper marking the definitive end of the conflict. He did not burn the pages, but placed them inside a velvet-lined metal dispatch box, turning the key and locking away the evidence of a painful chapter in the history of the House of Windsor. When Catherine stood to leave, the king reached out and squeezed her hand in silent gratitude, recognizing the immense strength and dignity she had brought to a moment of deep crisis. As she quietly exited the room, the morning light fully illuminated the study, casting a soft warmth over the ancient room where statecraft had briefly stepped aside to allow a father to preserve his love for his son. The intense royal power struggle reached its definitive conclusion as King Charles issued a permanent executive order barring Meghan Markle from ever returning to official duties, safeguarding the unyielding status and sacred patronages of the Princess of Wales. Major London newspapers immediately filled the morning newsstands with the striking headline, "Responsibility Cannot Be Borrowed," reflecting overwhelming public support for Catherine's steadfast resilience and the ironclad discipline of the Crown. Although the institutional door closed permanently on Meghan, A quiet personal channel remained open for Harry, leaving a poignant testament to a father's enduring love behind the cold fortress of royal power. Do you believe a monarchy preserved through such unyielding boundaries can ever truly heal, or will this remain an indelible scar across the history of the House of Windsor? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell today so you never miss our next deep dive into the dramatic world of the royal family.